the Academic Podcast Agency.
My name is David Attenborough and I'm a broadcaster.
Thank you very much. I've read in your biography that a favourite book of yours when you were younger was the Malay Archipelago by Alfred Wallace. Reading about those types of texts as a boy, what did they mean to you? This idea of naturalists and the adventures that they had?
Oh, Wallace was simply the excitement of going to foreign parts and seeing remarkable things and what's more, seeing them for the first time, which is sort of a slightly childish thing, but nonetheless, I was a child. And the thrill of exploring jungles and meeting, half-naked savages and going where no white foot had trod, that sort of stuff. But also, I think, really, the thought of somebody going and seeing all these extraordinary kinds of animals, forms of animals, the luxuriant, the huge variety and extravagance of nature which you see in the tropics.
Do you feel it inspired you with a sense of adventure that you still have now?
Well, yeah. No, you can't. I mean, an 8-year-old has a sense of adventure, and when you're 88-year-old, you've done a lot of those things. I mean, you've done silly things and you've taken risks to a minor degree, and you've gone to places where nobody speaks the language you speak and so on. And so you've done those things, and I think it would be untrue to say that you were still as thrilled about it as you were then. You aren't the person you were then. I mean, you hadn't got those experiences, and so, well, I'm an old man. Next year I'm 90. So the thrills you get are different. The thrills you get come from actually understanding to some degree some of the things that go on, so that you know when something is remarkable, and not simply because you haven't seen it before and it's rather strange looking. And those are different kinds of excitement.
And from this place of being 90 years old next year, how important do you feel it is to share what you've learned with younger generations?
Oh, I think that's rather pious, really. That I'm, one's reminded of Cecil B. DeMille, wasn't it, who said, "Do your films carry messages?" And he said, "When I want to send a message, I use Western Union," and I think there's something in that. And I think my films carry an implicit message. But occasionally, of course, I make films with explicit messages. I mean, programs like How Many People Can the Earth Hold make it fairly clear what line you're taking. But my bread and butter films, as it were, the things I've done more or less continuously for the last however many years it is, are simply hoping to show people what the world is like and how rich it is and the wonderful things that are in it.
I gather from listening to other interviews with you that you have a certain dislike for the idea of yourself as a celebrity.
Oh, well, only because it's the celebrity as it is in current usage is a fairly tawdry concept. I mean, anybody's a celebrity who appears enough for whatever reason. I mean, criminals are celebrities simply because they appear on television. And while sort of dismissing it like that, I've got to say that it is slightly mysterious, I mean, after all, if I had, aged 12, been told that, say, Gary Cooper or some Hollywood star like that had appeared in Leicester, I would have thought there had been the sort of second coming. I mean, I would have certainly dashed down to see him. I would have certainly, talk about hem of raiment or his signatures or whatever, I mean, I would have been starry-eyed and baffled and thrilled. Well, now, I suppose, I must be as widely known, my face must be as familiar as Gary Cooper's face was. But it's got nothing to do with merit or achievement or anything. It's just that you are familiar and you are meeting someone for the first time. I mean, and so that's nothing to be proud of.
How about where I was actually going with the question is that I'm interested in who we choose to lead us, who we choose to listen to. And I think it was 2012, you were voted one of the most trusted men in the UK.
No, that's illusory. I mean, that's just... You could say, I mean, if you want to denigrate, and one should every now and again, that simply means that I have been rather skillful at avoiding controversy. And I have been... I mean, I feel shifty about that. But during my BBC career, however, it was a sine qua non. I mean, if you were in charge of hours of broadcasting every year, or indeed every month, then it was a matter of principle to BBC people that they had no opinion. They were technical people who were responsible for getting people who had opinion, who had authority, and giving them the facility to use television to get that view over. But it was not your view, and that was a very strict thing. And I perhaps have stuck by that, or did stick by that, after I'd left the BBC, when I was no longer responsible for that. The habit of avoiding controversy and not saying anything unless you're absolutely sure of the truth of what you're saying stuck with me.
I'd like to talk about the Obama interview, just briefly. So Obama, I loved the interview. I thought it was very, very fascinating. He was very quick to, it seemed to me, to make a statement during that interview of two things: that yes, climate change was real, and two, that the answer to it is a financial one, and that it's about strong economies, strong jobs. I wondered if you had any thoughts about that, and what you think the president's biggest challenges are in trying to reconcile that promise of a growing economy with a reduced carbon future.
Oh, that requires a dissection of the American government system of government, which I'm not able to undertake. I don't know enough about it. But it's absolutely evident, is it not, to almost anybody, that the presidents, although they appear to be omnipotent, simply aren't. I mean, they have the Senate to deal with, and there are lots of other factors they have to deal with, and so they don't have freedom of action that you thought they might have. And certainly, it's absolutely clear that Obama has failed to get through some of his most cherished policies, simply because of the American system of government. I have no doubt at all that he is profoundly convinced about the importance of conservation, about the dangers of climate change and so on. And what can he do about it, is the question. And whenever he wishes to do something which in any way appears to affect the American economy badly, so that you spend more money doing those sort of things which don't have an immediate return, he's blocked. The whole reason that interview took place is still rather mysterious to me. I mean, I was told that the President of the United States had enjoyed my programs, and there was a new one coming on, and he'd love to see it. And if I'd like to visit him in the White House, he would like to meet me. So, I mean, that's an extraordinary compliment. So, of course, I said yes, and I'm given an airline ticket. I didn't know until we arrived that it was going to be filmed. So the whole thing was really rather mysterious. But if you're cynical, and why should one not be, you might say that, well, he's looking for the fact that in 18 months' time he will cease to be the President of the United States, which is their system. I mean, he's not eligible for another term. And so it could be that he's putting up a flag internationally to say, I am interested in conservation, any office. Who knows? I don't.
You mean for work? Post his presidency?
Well, to do something. I mean, I don't say he's grovelling for a job, but he might like a post somewhere where, dealing with the problems of conservation and the health of the world, where he can do something.
Let's hope so. I mean, he's a very charismatic man.
Yeah, very. And he was very generous to me, very nice to me.
Was there any parts of the interview which you felt should have been included, which weren't there when you watched it?
No, it was almost in all there. It was, after all, 20 minutes.
It was just 20 minutes.
Well, or maybe 25, but I mean, it was fleshed out with certain amount of documentary stuff about me, which was irrelevant. But I think almost every word he spoke with them.
What was the present that he gave you? I saw at the end there was a little bit.
A White House tie.
A White House tie. There's a lot of voices in the environmental world about indigenous groups and about the position that they found themselves in as being the holders of these much coveted lands which have a lot of different natural resources that people want to get their hands on. There was the recent book by Naomi Klein, This Changes Everything. She writes this statement, which I just wanted to read out, which is, in no small way, the actions of indigenous peoples and the decisions of Canadians to stand alongside them will determine the fate of the planet. I wondered if you had any thoughts about this idea of indigenous groups having such an ecological responsibility.
Yes. The first thing to say is that actually the hope I have for the future, which will solve all these problems, and which you haven't actually mentioned in the question, is that if we can, putting it simply, is that we can produce energy from renewable resources cheaper than carbon-based stuff. And if you do that, at a stroke, you will solve these problems, such as the tar sands, fracking, diesel engines, all the rest of it. I mean, it will go. It requires, of course, not only the technology to produce the energy from renewables, but to store it and to transport it. But if Americans could put a man on the moon in 10 years, I cannot believe that if you had an organised plan of all the developed nations to develop, say, 2% of their research budgets, which are already being spent on scientific research, into a focused and carefully prepared plan over 10 years to solve those problems of storage and transport and capture. That can't be done. I'm sure it could be done if it were. And that proposal was put forward to the G7 just recently. The embarrassment I had in talking with Obama was that I knew those proposals, and I knew them in some detail. And I had that the day I left for America, I had got it in my bag, which I read on the plane. And the problem is that it was embargoed for 2 weeks after I had seen Obama. So I was not allowed to speak. But I tried to articulate them in more detail, but he was interviewing me, not I interviewing him. And he slid past it, so I was not able to propose them into the details I would have wished. But I believe that in the end is the only way we're going to get over these problems. I mean, we have to do it eventually because carbon's going to run out, carbon-sourced energy. So why don't we do it now? And that would solve all the problems that we're talking about.
One of these climate economists that I interviewed for this program mentioned his belief that it would take 100 years to decarbonize the economy.
Well, to decarbonize totally, perhaps, but I don't. But the source of energy, once you get the storage problem solved, I don't believe that is a true estimate at all.
Okay, so the way that people have understood what the natural world is has changed so much during your professional career, the last 60 years plus. Are you able to explain why that is? How is it changed, and why do you think that process has taken place?
Our perception of the natural world. Well, if that's the subject, there's no point in being falsely modest. Television about natural history must have been responsible for that. I mean, you can't get audiences of 10 million, which we did not so long ago, for a natural history program. In this country alone, someone has produced a statistic to say the series I did in 1980 had been seen by 500 million people. I don't actually believe that statistic. I don't know how on earth you could calculate such a thing, but it was certainly seen by a lot of people. And the fact is that people are now better informed simply about okapis and birds of paradise and coral fish and antelope and so on, or better than they've ever been. And that must be a good thing. But with that, one hopes that somehow they will also get some understanding of the place in which humanity plays in the ecosystem, and how we are totally dependent upon the natural world for every breath we breathe and every mouthful of food we eat. And people understand that, actually. And I get a very heavy mail, as far as I'm concerned, I hope it doesn't get any heavier, of people who are saying that. We understand it. But then, mind you, they also say, well, why don't you do more about it, you personally? I mean, the reality of the politics escapes them, but the truth of what's happening about more people appear living on the planet than ever before is absolutely clear to them. And when you say, look, since we started television, since I was working in television when I started in the 50s, the population of the Earth has increased 3 times. Well, the people can understand. They understand that. They understand what it means.
It's a huge increase, that, isn't it?
Unbelievable. Mm. And it's going on, what's more.
People have intensely emotional responses to your work. I just wondered if that's something that you, in the writing of the script, whether that's something that you set out to achieve, to make people have an emotional as opposed to an intelligent response.
I would debate as to whether emotion and intelligence are actually in conflict. But if you took a script of mine, you wouldn't find much emotion in it. There aren't many adjectives in my scripts. They are scripts which produce words, the minimal words necessary to understand what you're looking at, is my ambition. And I, except on very few occasions, which are quite deliberately have sort of flagged that they are those kind of occasions, I have never put my emotional reactions into words on a script, on a commentary.
So a phrase that is used a lot by, certainly by academics, but I think it's probably more and more of a popular phrase, is this idea of a global village. I just wondered, for a man that has travelled so extensively throughout your life and met so many different people in so many different places, what you make of this term, a global village, and also what hopes you think there are for us to be able to cooperate with all of our neighbours at the same time.
Well, I don't know about our ability to cooperate, our ability to communicate, which is not the same thing, or indeed to be aware of, which is also not the same thing. Those two things have certainly increased beyond imagination over the last 30 years. I mean, you go into a wild part of northern Kenya to try and find some really remote place, and a chap turns up and takes out a mobile phone from his pocket, and he's on the email. He's on the net. And, I mean, the world has become totally aware. I don't say necessarily aware in the sense they understand what's going on, but they know there's a heck of a lot going on out there beyond them. And so that has transformed things, and both, I suppose, good and bad, but it certainly transformed things.
Another conversation that I had with my climate economist, the environmental movement and what he terms as radical greens as actually being more harm than good. His line of reasoning is that they make a lot of noise, but they don't do a lot of good in achieving changes in policy, and that effectively they polarize the conversation and they make it a them and us situation, when in actual fact with climate change there is only us.
I don't think that's an argument. I think it's a fair statement. And that kind of gross polarization doesn't help any controversy. And it's a pity that it occasionally, in certain circumstances, has to be focused in which it's either black or white, whereas we all know that the world is composed of tone in between the two. And radical, I think the thing one most deplores is when the radical Greens go for emotion and not logic. And that's very dangerous. To destroy huge fields of planting by Motherstead or wherever else, where scientists trying to research the implications of genetic change in crops, is to be totally deplored. And it's like the burning of the books.
You were quoted, or I've read in one of the many interviews that you've given, that real change can only come through economics and our politics. Am I allowed to ask who you voted for in the last election?
Who I voted for? And who I voted for in the last election, well, I didn't have much of a choice here, but I did, in fact, vote Liberal.
Would you ever consider voting for a Green Party or for an environmental movement?
I think the voice of an environmentalist would be very valuable in the House of Commons, and there's a voice that ought to be heard. And it is an important insight, an important attitude to the natural world that should be heard when people are debating things that affect the natural world to the degree which they do. So I'm very glad that Caroline Lucas is back in Parliament, and I'm delighted. And in fact, we have here, we have Rothschild, and he respect what his view on the natural world is very much. He's very powerful in what he says. I mean, he says it very well, and I think his voice should be heard. I don't necessarily agree with all the things he says, but I think he's a useful contributor to the debate.
How much agency do you think the individual has in responding to climate change as opposed to the responsibility of governments?
Well, I think there's a continuum, and it would be terrible if there was a schism between those two things. I mean, actions of governments should be reflecting the actions of change in the electorate. That's what democracy is about, anyway. And the trouble is the question is how informed can the electorate be? And the answer is that it can't be all that well informed, and that somewhere in the middle of that continuum, there has to be an equation in which someone says, well, I don't understand what he's talking about, but I think he's a good bloke. And that's not a bad basis for democratic votes. Because if you started to ask me about the complexities of economic theory, I will have to tell you I surrender. I don't understand. And the lots even in the area of my own, I was going to use the word expertise, but I'm far from expert, but in my own area of conservation, there are complexities. They're not simple questions. And you have to be persuaded, in a democracy presumably, that the man you entrust with power has the right sort of instincts and motives. And the way you discover that is by debating with them. But an awful lot has to be taken on trust. Or at any rate, on the basis that I think he's a good bloke. Or she.
It's so very true, that, isn't it? The power of charisma to actually move things forward. Yeah. There was a very lovely part at the end of the Obama interview where you said that the natural world is where you go in moments of celebration and moments of grief. It is the greatest prop and stay to humanity's own feeling for himself. I thought that was very lovely, and I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed hearing you say that. Left me wondering, do you think a reduced relationship with the natural world, in the context that well over 50% of the globe are now urbanised, do you think that's altered us psychologically?
Well, if it has, it's altered a great section of the human race for the past 200 years. I mean, the Industrial Revolution, which is 250 years old, produced a huge section of the British public who were totally out of touch with the natural world. And I can only say that I think that's an impoverishment for them personally, that as well as affecting their decisions as to if indeed they had a say in what politicians were doing. But it is a huge loss. And you feel it all the time, and I come across it all the time, and people write to me and say, that in moments of grief, the only thing that they find is that the only solace they find is by going to the natural world, or indeed in putting on natural history programs on the television. And that must mean something to the psychologist, and I believe it to be the case that it's difficult to be a fully rounded human being unless you have some kind of feeling of the natural world of which you're a part.
As I mentioned, I'm going out to Alberta, and the religious beliefs of the indigenous groups out there tend to be so I'm told, a mixture of adopted Catholicism and also this traditional animistic approach to nature, that nature has a spirit which it's important to commune with. I wonder really if you have any responses to that idea of nature as a spirit, but also as a natural scientist. Are you dismissive that religion or belief has a place in dealing with these matters?
Well, you don't have a choice. I mean, it is there, and you must respect it. People have their own rights to think what they think, and more than that, I don't know what you can say. Expressing these things in religious terms is a complicated thing, and inevitably involves simplifications, and if you take them to extreme, absurdities. And however, it is their belief, and that they have a right to say it. And what's more, if it's their environment, they have a strong right to freedom of action.
So do you think there is an issue with, you use the words there, their environment? Do you think there is a territory issue?
Well, one of the great things, of course, is that our understanding of ecology makes it absolutely clear that there are hardly any ecosystems anymore. We are one very, very complicated system. I mean, it's not so long ago, and in my lifetime even, that responsible town councils poured untreated sewage into the sea on the grounds that the sea was very big and washed it all away. There was no problem. And it wasn't only sewage, but it was also industrial waste. And the consequences we now know, that if you put it on one side of the Atlantic, the other side's going to feed it in the end. And that remarkable thing of Cousteau, who said, I'm now in the middle of the Pacific as far away as I can get from any land, and look what I found on the surface of the sea, plastic. So we have to regard the world as one coherent ecosystem. You can't get away from it. Of course, you at your immediate doorstep, you have more direct action than you do on something over 1,000 miles away. But nonetheless, the unity of the ecosystem is perfectly clear.
Do you yourself do things that the rest of us do, like recycle and?
Yes, but only out of a kind of ritual. Well, as a ritual, really. I mean, I do it very carefully. I mean, I fish out little bits of plastic and think, that can't go into the paper, and put it there. Whether or not our wonderful our crews take the stuff away and put it all in the same bin, I don't know. They could well be. But no, I certainly do those things. And the reason why we're getting on at this moment, I've got double glazing being installed downstairs, because I think that's very important. And if you ask me, have I done the arithmetic between how much energy it costs in building a new double framing and the people who are involved in installing it and the cost of doing it, is that more or less equated by what you will save on your heating bills? I can't give you the answer, and I don't care. I mean, in this issue, I just feel more comfortable if I was double glazed, that's all.
It's interesting that you use the word tradition there, and I think there is the way we respond to our cultural norms, traditional norms, are very interesting. And the West certainly does have very, very strong cultural norms. I wanted to touch on a programme that you commissioned years and years ago, as in your capacity as controller of BBC Two, Kenneth Clarke's Civilization. And that unanswerable question of what is civilization has stayed with me all throughout my formative years. And obviously, he never really gives a kind of succinct answer.
Well, he says right in the first programme, what is civilization? I don't know, but I know it when I see it, which is not a bad answer.
So, in the spirit of that, do you think that our goals and aspirations are too short-term? Are we lacking a belief in some kind of expansive future of humanity? Are we worse off not having the spiritual conviction of our forefathers?
Well, we're worse off in as much as it makes life much more difficult. And it's very easy, or comparatively easy, if you've got a moral code that says black and white all the time. Doing this is okay and doing that is a sin. And that makes life comparatively easy. I mean, there are problems within that, of course. But if you don't have a clear code of behaviour, as many religions prescribe, it does make daily actions more. I suppose you just don't think about them.
Okay, so excuse the breadth of this question, but it's something I wanted to ask you and to allow you to answer as you wish. So, as you say, you're 90 years old next year, extremely well-travelled man with a huge prolific output of creative work. I wonder at this point in your life, as a natural scientist and also as an anthropologist perhaps, who are Homo sapiens and how important is their creative capacity?
Well, who are Homo sapiens is, you know the answer to that, or unless you're suggesting that there are sections of humanity that are a different species, which is a very dangerous road to go down, which certainly Hitler was on the way of going down. So that who they are is clear. It's extraordinarily variable species, that is true. The huge difference between humanity and the natural world is that we have a way of externalizing knowledge, and we do it with writing and various other forms. But we can externalize knowledge. You can put it down there on the floor, and there it is. And anybody with a proper education can pick it up and share it and acquire it. That makes a simply enormous difference. Darwinian selection is now out of the window as far as Homo sapiens is concerned. No other animal has that. I mean, there are animals with traditions of behaviour, but they require face-to-face. Humanity has got the power to store knowledge across time and across place, and that gives us huge power. We haven't yet got the wisdom to handle it properly, but that's what makes us different from the rest of the world.
And I know that music is something that's extremely important to you. Time and time again, I read in your interviews that it appears as the other half of your life almost. And I know that you are constantly presenting certain musical events. Or I really enjoyed the interview that you did with Björk a couple of years ago. How important do you think our creative capacity is as human beings in the context of I suppose technology, but also in how we manage to navigate our way out of this current climate crisis?
If a person has no musical appreciation at all, he is missing a form of communication which alone can say certain things. And to that extent, his life is impoverished. I cannot pretend that someone who's deaf or tone deaf, I can't say that his life is all that poorer than my life. Maybe he's got other things which he finds of absorbing interest. I've got lots of blindnesses. I hardly ever read a novel. And one of my mentors, and indeed Nancy's mentors, Hugh Weldon, used to say, "You're uncivilized. You just don't understand what the Brontes said, or you don't understand about George Eliot or Tolstoy." And to that extent, he's right. And I occasionally, periodically through my life, haven't done recently, but I certainly, when I was about 19, I suddenly realised that people were talking about things I knew nothing, and I drew up a list of things that I thought I ought to read. And I stolidly went through this lot and ticked them off, and I ought to know what Wuthering Heights was about, or what Dickens was about, and George Eliot was about, and indeed Tolstoy. But it's not part of my life, and I'm aware that I am deficient in that. That's a little spot of blindness in my awareness of the world and understanding of the world. But you only have 24 hours in the day, and if I need to understand a bit more about the latest genetics, and then it's my choice.
It's really interesting you quote Hugh Weldon, because Nancy was very much that character in my life. She was always giving me lists of books that I should read. So most of them I think I've got through by now. But that idea that art somehow constitutes your fibre, which allows you to be productive and allows you to be, a kind of stronger force in the world, I've always found very interesting. Again, quite a broad question, but in that spirit, what does playing the piano, perhaps, or what does your recreational time listening to music, what does that mean to you? What does that give to you?
I don't know that I couldn't express what it means. I know I feel thwarted if I can't play the piano for a number of days. But let me get it right. I mean, I don't sit down and dash off a Chopin scherzo, I mean, I am very, very plodding, and continually tell myself repeatedly, many times a year, well, next month I'll go back to lessons and really start. And now I've bought this new score, I will sit down and I'll really learn it, and I will play my scales, and I will repeat this particular bar over and over again. I don't do it. I go back to stumbling through things, and I don't rate that very highly. I mean, I don't see it as a great psychological release or anything. What is a psychological release is going to a Bach mass. That is undoubtedly among the great moments, but Beethoven too. I mean, Mass in the Missa Solemnis or his opera Fidelio. They stimulate extraordinary emotions. Yes. Picking my way through a Bach fugue doesn't. Just irritates. I just get irritated with my incompetence.
So do you feel like it's a discipline, something you have to do to yourself if you're not enjoying it?
No, not anymore. No, and I'm not a very disciplined person, really.
Really, that surprises me. With somebody that's had so much of an output, you don't consider yourself to be
I don't call that a discipline. I mean, if you're engaged in a post and part of your job is to turn out a script, you do it. That's not discipline. Well, I suppose it is discipline, but it's not self-imposed. It's imposed from outside. I mean, literally, I get edgy if I've got nothing to do, but that's different.
How often does that happen?
Well, if I go for about 3 or 4 days and nobody cares tuppence whether I'm anywhere, and whether I haven't written a commentary or I haven't recorded a commentary or done something, I begin to feel that I ought to pull myself together. No, I don't feel that. I just feel unsatisfied.
Climate change is a luxury issue. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that as a statement.
I don't think it's a luxury issue if you have any degree of social conscience. An economist I suppose, the science of, economics, if it is indeed a science, doesn't take account of emotions as far as I can see. And it results in child labour apart from anything else. And I find it appalling to suppose that actions are all determined by immediate reward. I don't believe that's true. And in any case, the other aspects of the economic system, which gives jurisdiction of one person over other people, is if it's unguided by any moral basis, surely it must be a great danger. In every case where women have control over their bodies, where they have literacy, where they have appropriate medical facilities, and as I say, political equality, the birth rate falls. And there's no exception to that. And there are plenty of places where, in fact, that happens within non-Western circumstances, like Kerala, for example, in India. And that has to be the one straw that we can clutch in facing the population explosions. And a very good reason as to why developed countries should give economic aid to less developed countries. So that's, as I say, the one straw. And you may say, well, it's a pretty fragile straw. Well, it is. On the other hand, I sometimes think that, of course, the decision is a moral one in a sense. And I sometimes think that moral attitudes can change much more quickly than we imagine. I mean, it came as a huge surprise to me, at any rate, that suddenly the Berlin Wall fell. I mean, the reasons for the Berlin Wall falling and for the communist model to suddenly disintegrate in Europe is still a mystery to me. Taking a farther historical view, it is actually extraordinary, isn't it, that in the early decades of the 19th century, it was perfectly acceptable in Western society that people should own other human beings as chattels. And yet, within 3, 4, 5 decades, it became unthinkable for any civilized person to accept what slavery meant. And that's a huge change worldwide, in attitudes. And I keep hoping that somehow or other there will be a change of attitude amongst the people of the world towards the environment. And there are signs that you see that. So I'm just hopeful, but I don't put it forward as a solution. I'm just saying it is one straw that we can clutch at.
It's interesting that you mentioned the abolition of slavery in the Naomi Klein book, which has proved to be very popular on the subject of climate change. She uses that as an example of one of the few times in history when a civil agenda, an agenda of the people, a social movement, has beaten the interest of commerce. And so she uses this as a hope that actually, okay, social movements can trump the motivations of the market, as it were. However, worryingly, she points out that a lot of the slave owners in that time were paid huge recompenses by different banks and different world orders at the time for their loss of income in this, which again, from this point in history, seems morally as corrupt as anything, doesn't it?
I don't think that's corrupt. I think that's a way of solving a practical problem. And I mean, and it is a matter of conscience, after all. I mean, and you may say that all slave owners are intolerable people. Not much evidence that that's true. I mean, you could think of a lot of exceptions. I mean, in America. I mean, the presidents were perfectly responsible people who actually owned slaves. Lincoln.
Due to the treaties that they signed several hundred years ago, there would be a case for paying the indigenous groups to keep the carbon in the ground and to not exploit their resources for the good of everybody else. Well, I know that for Obama, this is a very strong line, that the answer is that they work together, that actually finance and the economy work together. The other side of the argument says you have to pull down the economic model in order to save the environment.
Pulling down economic models is a fairly drastic thing. I mean, if you think about the French Revolution pulling down an economic model, it did, but it also chopped off the heads of quite a lot of innocent people. I think the solution, if there is one at all, is the one which I've outlined earlier, which is that you actually use the economic system to achieve your own ends by producing energy in a way that is much cheaper than energy that's based on carbon.
There's a strong argument that by addressing a lot of environmental issues, you actually are addressing a lot of the issues surrounding equality. And it's been said by a lot of more climate skeptic characters that, in fact, the Green Movement is it's a socialist conspiracy. In that sense, do you see an alignment with environmental issues with political issues?
I don't think it's a socialist tendency to want to remove poisons from the air. I don't think it's a socialist tendency to want to reduce the poisoning of the sea. I think it's a moral question, but it's also practical in both circumstances.
So you don't see it being so much political as social?
Yeah, I mean, of course there is. Underlying or one aspect of what you're saying is, and putting it really coarsely, do you allow people with no education and no experience of the world to have a major statement in what happens to their money? And I think it comes to what I was saying, was that the people can't necessarily understand these things, but by and large they've got a good feeling for whether a man is a good chap or not, and whether he is well disposed, and whether he's acting in a way which you quite like, you wouldn't mind him as a neighbour. And people are pretty good at judging that. But I can't judge a lot of the economic policies I'm faced with. Turning and turning in the widening, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for the classic Attenborough intonation.
My name is David Attenborough, and I'm a maker of television programmes.